Property tax relief showdown. The first special session of the Texas legislature ends without any agreement to lower your property tax bills. Are you ready for special session 2?
I definitely am.
Governor Abbott calls for an immediate second special session. How Texas teachers could soon benefit, and an upcoming meeting between two Republican leaders could lead to a deal to end the property tax impasse at the Capitol. Pay dispute. The Texas Attorney General's office and Texas Comptroller's office butt heads over whether suspended Attorney General Ken Paxton should still be paid after he was impeached. Affirmative action. The U.S. Supreme Court strikes down the use of race for college admissions, calling it unconstitutional. What North Texans on both sides of the issue tell us. I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas starts right now. Hello and welcome. The first special session of the Texas legislature ended Tuesday the same way it began, with no agreement between Republican legislative leaders over the best way to provide Texans real relief on their property tax bills. So Governor Greg Abbott immediately called lawmakers back for a second special session. And property tax relief is the only topic. The governor wants legislation to cut property tax rates solely by reducing the school district maximum compressed tax rate, and instead using more state revenues, including sales tax, to pay for schools. He also wants legislation to put Texas on a path to gradually eliminate the maintenance and operations portion of your school property tax bill. On Wednesday, their first day of the special session, number 2, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick told senators he will meet with House Speaker Dade Phelan next week to discuss property tax relief, signaling a potential end to their month-long standoff at the Capitol.
I sent him a text and said the best way to resolve this is face-to-face. They have responded of looking forward to a meeting.
His remarks came after senators passed a property tax relief bill that also includes extra payments for Texas teachers for the next 2 years. An amendment proposed by Democratic State Senator Roland Gutierrez of San Antonio and approved and signed by the other 30 senators calls for giving teachers an extra $2,000 in school districts with more than 20,000 students and an extra $6,000 in districts with fewer than 20,000 students.
So I want everybody in Texas to know that we all sat up at the front with the president's leadership, and we did this. It took us an hour and a half, 2 hours, but we worked out all those differences.
The bill also provides $18 billion in total property tax relief. Homeowners would see their homestead exemptions rise to $100,000. Senators say that provides savings of nearly $2,600 to most homeowners for the first 2 years and nearly $3,000 in savings for the first 2 years for homeowners over 65. The legislation also doubles the business franchise tax exemption to nearly $2.5 million. That means 67,000 small businesses would not have to pay a business franchise tax at all. The Texas House also convened, and the Ways and Means Committee passed a different bill than the Senate's. It doesn't increase the homestead exemption, but it does focus solely on reducing property tax rates and instead replacing them with state revenues.
So we reach out to our friends in the House, and we ask them to seriously consider this bill.
We reached out to Speaker Phelan's office for comment, but didn't hear back. Both the House and Senate must approve the same bill before Governor Abbott can sign it. Voters must then also approve it on Election Day in November. Now to the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling to strike down affirmative action in college admissions, calling the practice unconstitutional. We spoke with two North Texans on both sides of the issue. Democratic Congressman Mark Vesey and former Texas Education Commissioner Republican Michael Williams.
I was right. Maybe I was 30 years too early, but I was right.
Michael Williams says he felt vindicated after reading the Supreme Court's ruling rejecting affirmative action for college campus admissions. Before he served as the head of the Texas Education Agency for former Governor Rick Perry, Williams was the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights in the U.S. Education Department for President George H.W. Bush. In December 1990, he said he created a stir when he announced that the government considered scholarships based solely on race were illegal.
We should not use race to heap on burdens on some people and benefits to other people based upon their bloodlines. I believe that then. I believe that today.
But Democratic Congressman Mark Vesey of Fort Worth sharply disagrees, and he criticized the majority of justices behind the ruling.
Education economic progress in this country for Black Americans has just been rolled back by this court. I think that it's sad, and I think that it's really unfortunate that
Going forward, VC says he worries the ruling will have a damaging impact.
the message that was sent by the Supreme Court and the 6 justices today is, if you are Black or brown, do not, unless you can throw a football or run or shoot a basketball really well, do not apply.
But Williams says colleges and universities can still consider an applicant's family history, economic background, and zip code when trying to create a diverse campus.
And America's real work is getting young people prepared to get the learning that they need and achieve the merits that they can.
But if we don't get to the root cause of a lot of this, which includes taking a look historically about how we got to the place that we are right now, then it's not going to matter.
There is also a pay dispute now between 2 state agencies over whether impeached Attorney General Ken Paxton should still be paid even though he's suspended. The showdown is between Texas Comptroller Glenn Hager's office and the office of suspended Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Mark Jones, a political science professor at Rice University, says it puts Paxton in a tight spot.
This probably adds more noise than anything else, and unwelcome noise for Attorney General Paxton.
After the Texas House impeached Paxton late last month, he was immediately placed on leave. On June 1st, the Comptroller's office sent a letter to John Scott, who was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott as the interim Attorney General. It said, quote, "In compliance with the Texas Constitution, no salary payment may occur to Attorney General Warren Kenneth Paxton while in a suspended status." But records show when the Attorney General's office submitted its June payroll, it included Paxton's $12,800 monthly salary. The Comptroller's office says it briefly placed payroll on hold for all of the Attorney General office's 4,200 employees until Paxton's pay file could be removed. All of the employees were paid on time, but Paxton didn't get a paycheck. An email sent Wednesday by the AG's office to the Comptroller's office said the Constitution could have, but does not, provide that his salary should be withheld during the pendency of impeachment proceedings. The letter goes on to say that the AG's office will still submit Paxton's salary on a supplemental payroll.
I think this puts staffers in the Attorney General's office in a difficult position, because if they made the decision to not pay Attorney General Paxton, they would be effectively siding against him. But if they made it for, they can effectively say, look, we're just continuing with the status quo.
On Thursday, the Texas Comptroller's office sent an email in response saying as long as Paxton remains suspended, any request for payment, quote, will be held and not processed through our statewide systems using state-appropriated funds. The Comptroller's office said the AG's office can't pay both its interim leader, John Scott, and Paxton while he's suspended. Ken Paxton's lead lawyer, Tony Busby, told CBS News Texas that his client has not requested a paycheck from the state and did not direct anyone to make any such request on his behalf. Coming up, more of our conversation with Congressman Mark Vesey and former Texas Education Commissioner Michael Williams. Plus, later we speak with 2 Republican Texas House members who have differing opinions on how a deal will ultimately be struck on a property tax relief bill. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Supreme Court's ruling to abolish race as a consideration in college admissions is reverberating nationwide and here in Texas. We spoke with Democratic Congressman Mark Vesey of Fort Worth, who criticized the ruling from the nation's highest court. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court has now struck down affirmative action using race for college admissions, calling it unconstitutional. What's your reaction?
Very disappointed, not unexpected. I think that a lot of conservative legal minds and a lot of conservative attorneys and legal groups around the country have been wanting to strike down affirmative action for some time. I think that it's sad that, these current Supreme Court justices, many of which, invited African Americans to sit during their confirmation hearings, to sit right behind them, to to perhaps show the rest of the country, to show African Americans that they wouldn't be hostile towards African Americans. Some have Black family members. Many talked about diverse experiences in their neighborhoods and other organizations that they were involved with that sort of led them to diverse experiences. And you look at a man like Chief Justice Earl Warren, who was perhaps single-handedly more responsible for putting more Japanese Americans in internment camps than any other person before he was on the court. But something changed throughout his life. And despite, if he were alive today, he'd be over 100 years old. So despite probably not having any Black friends or not viewing Blacks as social equals, he knew he had to do something, and he voted and ruled the right way on Brown versus the Board of Education and other subsequent decisions that the court had before it dealing with integration in America. And he did that without these same social interactions. And so it's disturbing that we're going back, that a lot of Chief Justice Warren's decisions that were so instrumental in social education, economic progress in this country for Black Americans has just been rolled back by this court. I think that it's sad, and I think that it's really unfortunate that despite some of their experiences, they still just don't get it.
Well, I wanted to read to you some of the justices and what they said in their opinions. Justice Sotomayor wrote that the decision, quote, rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote, this is truly a tragedy for us all. She said, with let them eat cake obliviousness today, the majority pulls the ripcord and announces colorblindness for all by legal fiat. But deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. And then Justice Thomas criticized Justice Jackson and saying that she claims, quote, locks Blacks into seemingly perpetual inferior caste. Such a view is irrational. It is an insult to individual achievement and cancerous to young minds seeking to push through barriers rather than co-sign themselves to permanent victimhood. So what do you make of that statement? I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, first off, very, proud and how profound of, Judge Ketanji Jackson Brown's comments, how it's just, you can feel it to the core, especially with me being a Black American, what she said. And Judge Sotomayor, and how disappointing that Clarence Thomas would say what he said when his confirmation hearings were not going the right way. It was the Black community in this country that said, maybe if he gets in there, he will see the light and he will change. It was Black people that said that he shouldn't, have his chance to replace Thurgood Marshall in the Supreme Court thrown away. Maybe he will change, and he's just gotten worse. It was Black people that had his back, and he's forgotten that history because that thing was not going the direction in which he wanted. And it's unfortunate that whatever is going on in his head, that he would say something like that. I find it profoundly disappointing, but I'm disappointed in the other ones too. I'm disappointed in Amy Coney Barrett. She goes to she graduated from a law school that has an undergraduate program that's this undergraduate program at Notre Dame is intentionally very Catholic. I think the student body is probably 80+% Catholic. They can be very intentional about wanting to keep that student body that Catholic at one of the country's finest universities. But you can't be intentional about wanting to have a diverse student body. That's just wrong. What it says is that it's okay to create certain systems and create breaks, whether they're legacies, whether they're a certain religion, whether they're athletes or musicians, that you can create and be intentional in these areas. But when it comes to diversity on your campus, for just regular student bodies and high achieving students that are Black and brown, that you can't. And that is just wrong. So disappointing across the board for all of these justices today, all of these 6 that voted the way that they did.
And I wanted to ask you, going forward, what do you think needs to happen on college campuses and universities?
I think that it's going to be bad. I mean, I mean, college can be a really great, diverse experience, but college can also be a place where you see like a lot of racial and religious intolerance too. We still have, Greek fraternal and sorority systems on this campus that still think it's okay to not let people in your sorority or fraternity because of their religion or because of their race. And with student body populations across the country at state universities and select universities, having a smaller Black population where these kids are not going to have that social interaction and see other people as their social equals, you're probably going to see hostilities like that become even worse. And so I think that it's going to be very important for colleges to look for different ways that they can increase their Black and brown populations. I think it's going to be tough. I mean, you look at University of Texas right now, you're talking about a campus in Austin that is still only 5% Black. You're talking about a campus in Austin that is still less than 10% Hispanic in a city and a state that's heavily Hispanic. And despite all of their outreach efforts, and I know they've been earnest in their outreach efforts because I used to be in the state legislature, they can still only get paltry numbers in these areas. And it's only going to get worse because the message that was sent by the Supreme Court and the 6 justices today is, if you are Black or brown, do not, unless you can throw a football or run or shoot a basketball or really well, do not apply. That's the message that was sent to Black and brown families today.
But I was talking to before former TEA Commissioner Michael Williams, a Republican, and he said there are other ways that colleges and universities can have diverse student populations without using race as, they can look at their backgrounds, they can look where they're from, they can look at whether they're economically disadvantaged and still pull together a diverse campus. What do you think of that?
First, I know Michael very well. Worked with him when I was in the state legislature, and he lives here in the Metroplex. But my first thing I would say is, again, if a kid that has a 2.5 can get in because you think that he can run the 40 faster than anyone else, then why can't a kid with a 4.0 get in that may have a 1200 on their SAT instead of a 1300 on their SAT? There's something wrong with that. Like, if you think that it's okay to give that kid a break, but it's not okay to give this Black kid a break, that's a problem that this country needs to try to unpack. That's a problem, because you're seeing people in certain racial and gender roles, and you're saying that it's okay if we give them a break in this area, but not in that area. And that is something much deeper that we don't have time to delve into today, that people need to look into their hearts over. The second thing that I would say is that he's right. They will be able to look at other circumstances. But again, when you look at a university as large as the University of Texas, one of the top state universities in the entire country, and the fact that they are still only at 5% Black and about 8 or 9% Hispanic, despite their tremendous outreach efforts. And I can remember when I was in the state legislature and the late Bill Powers was the president of UT, he was very intentional about wanting to recruit more Black and brown students. And even with top 10% and affirmative action, they just were not able to. It's going to get worse. It is going to get worse, and it's going to make these campuses less open and less welcoming to Black and brown students. That's just a matter of fact.
And my last question to you, Congressman, and I appreciate your time. When I was talking to Michael Williams, he said the emphasis is now also going to have to be on elementary school education, even before that, and middle school and high school learning, to get these students, all students, better prepared for college? Your thoughts?
Obviously we need to be making progress in that area. But why are we not paying teachers more? Why are we not doing more for a lot of these lower income students that come from that are being raised by their grandparents? We have more and more kids whose parents are incarcerated, who's being raised by their grandparents or great grandparents that have been in and out of a bunch of different apartment complexes and different school systems. Why are we not doing anything to look at those? Because so we can do more when it comes to elementary, but if we don't get to the root cause of a lot of this, which includes taking a look historically about how we got to the place that we are right now, then it's not going to matter. We have to be able to do that if we really want to address the situation. And I think today's ruling by this court seems that there's absolutely not an appetite in conservative America or on this court to take a look at history.
Former Texas Education Commissioner and Republican Michael Williams praised the ruling. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down using race for college admissions, calling it unconstitutional. What's your reaction?
Well, it's odd for me because I made that same decision 30 plus years ago when I was the Assistant Secretary of Education and Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. And I believe that then, as I do now, that race should not be used in admissions and financial aid decisions on university campuses.
And why did you believe that then?
I think the 14th Amendment is fairly clear that we should not use race to heap on burdens on some people and benefits to other people based upon their bloodlines. I believe that then. I believe that today.
And so when you heard and read the opinions, what was going through your mind?
As a lawyer, I read it as, okay, now I'm trying to understand what the court is saying, but as a human being who's been through this issue, and I need to tell you that when I made my decision in December of 1990, I was on the front page of every newspaper in America, above the fold. And I used to joke with President George H.W. Bush, the father, that he started the Persian Gulf War to get me off the front page of every newspaper in America. So when I read it with some sense of relief. I was right. Maybe I was 30 years too early, but I was right. And it's a long opinion. I mean, 230 some odd pages. You didn't need 230 pages to say what they needed to say. But it is a big issue in America. But what I hope that people get from it is where we go next, because that's more important than what this opinion says itself.
And before we get to that, because I do want to hear your opinion of that, why do you think it took this long from when you made your announcement to today?
Well, I think it took that long because you had to get a new composition of the court. And you had to get a firm conservative composition of the court. And so that's just about getting the right number of votes to make it happen. It wasn't about the legal authority. It was about, you got at least 5, but today's court had 6, but 6 votes to do it.
And what was the impact of your decision back then? What happened?
Well, in 1990, what he did was create a bunch of drama. And I made my decision in December. The president had vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1990 in September. So the civil rights community thought this was the second shoe dropping, and they weren't connected. I did not talk to the White House before I made my decision. And I can remember that back when I made my decision, and many of the early questions were, what did the president know and when did he know it? The president didn't know anything, because I didn't share my opinion and what I was going to issue with the White House. Perhaps I should have, but I didn't. I was 36 years old. I just didn't share. So the impact was, it splashed a new light on affirmative action, but it didn't change a whole lot at the time. What it did was put people on notice that this issue was going to be in the forefront of conversation regarding higher education going forward. And you may remember that I held the seat that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas held a couple of years before me. He held that seat under President Reagan. I held it under President George H.W. Bush.
And did you have conversations with him about what your policy statement was?
Of course. I mean, Justice Thomas and I would speak all the time. We'd spend Friday nights playing Midwest and drinking Long Island iced teas. I mean, yeah, I talked to Justice Thomas all the time.
And so I did want to read you some of the reaction from some of the Supreme Court justices who dissented. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote that this decision rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress. And Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson called this, quote, truly a tragedy for us all. She wrote, with let them eat cake obliviousness, today the majority pulls the ripcord and announces color blindness for all by legal fiat, but deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. How do you react to that?
Let's go to the first one with Justice Sotomayor. The reality, it does reverse precedent, because the Bakke decision in 1978 said you could use race as a factor in order to remedy the present effects of past discrimination or to advance diversity. So it does reverse that. But in 2003, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor said, this cannot last forever. And at some point in time, and she said, maybe within the next 25 years, we will stop and need to stop the use of race in higher education. So everybody knew this was coming. Everybody knew this was coming. But Justice Sotomayor is right. It did erase precedent. I'm gonna take a little issue with Justice
Brown Jackson. Yeah.
And the reason I'm gonna take issue with her is because of something I mentioned earlier. Now this puts us in the place where we needed to have always been in the last 30 some odd years. Let's just make sure that brown and Black kids, that we do a prenatal to high school education training with them, such that they are ready to go to college, they're ready for post-secondary experience, and that they have the interest to do so. Because affirmative action didn't add kids to be able to go to college. We just moved kids around. We moved them from one school to another school. We moved them from a mid-range school in our state systems to our flagships. We moved them from a mid-range school in our state system to a private elite school. But we didn't add kids who were capable to be competitive in school. Now we've got to make sure, and I say this sadly as a former state education commissioner, we've got to do a better job of making sure that we add more kids who have the interest and the ability to compete at the collegiate level. Affirmative action didn't do anything about adding. It just moved kids around.
And so going forward, because before you said it's important now to focus on where things go in the future. So you just, to your point that you just made, what should colleges and universities be considering when, they want to have a diverse campus? How do they go about to achieve that?
I think there are at least two lanes that we're going to be in. Colleges and universities, I just had dinner with the president of my alma mater, University of Southern California, a couple of weeks ago. Colleges and universities are going to use proxies for race. So they're going to look at kids' economic background, whether it's a first generation student. They're going to look at certain zip codes that have been underperforming. They're going to figure out other ways other than race, because the Constitution doesn't say jack about zip codes, doesn't say anything about economic income, doesn't say anything about these other issues. And so they're going to use other proxies to figure out how to get a diverse classroom.
And you're okay with that?
But, pardon me?
And you're okay with that?
I'm fine. Constitution doesn't say anything about zip codes. What I'm more interested in is what we do at the learning level for these youngsters. And at the learning level of these youngsters, we've got to do a much, much better job of learning how to teach a classroom that's browner, blacker, and poorer than classrooms that most of us were in when we were youngsters. And that's a new instructional model than we've had in the past. And that will be the saving grace for us as a country.
And
so
I wanted to ask you on that point, on that very point that you make. So now the emphasis really needs to be on elementary school, secondary school, high school, to get them ready, for college.
Let me even go before your elementary. It's going to be on prenatal. We need to be helping moms learn how to help their kids learn when mom is pregnant. Why are we waiting till the kid is 5 years old? The data tells us that there's an enormous amount of learning that youngster needs to get by the time that youngster's 3. So let's start when mom gets pregnant. Let's begin teaching moms and dads how to help their kid learn before that kid goes to institutional school. But yes, you're right. We've got to do a better job that's why I said at the beginning, from prenatal to high school.
I wanted to ask your response. Justice Thomas said today, he said, that the decision, quote, sees the university's admissions policies for what they are: rudderless, race-based preferences designed to ensure a particular racial mix in their entering classes. And Chief Justice Roberts said, for too long, universities have concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. Our constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. So, given that, and going back, that aligns with your views going back 30 years ago. Do you feel a sense of vindication?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. You know, as I think I said to you earlier, I spoke with my chief deputy, the person who was my chief deputy at the time, back there in 1990. And we, in some odd way, celebrate today's decision. We were right then. We were wrong in the politics. We were right on the law. And now America can get to its real work. And America's real work is getting young people prepared to get the learning that they need and achieve the merits that they can.
How two Republican representatives think a deal on property tax relief will be finally reached at the Texas Capitol, when Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas comes right back. Republican representatives we spoke with have differing opinions over how the legislature will finally come to terms on the best way to provide Texans real relief on their property tax bills. We spoke with Matt Shaheen of Plano. What do you make of this ongoing, continued back and forth between the governor, lieutenant governor, to some extent the Speaker of the House, over this impasse, this standoff over property tax relief?
Well, look, both chambers are calling out property taxes as a priority. The citizens of Texas want it, and we'll end up getting there. I think the two chambers are a lot closer than people might think. But during a special session, the dynamics change. The governor has a lot more power during a special session, so he can dictate what kind of property taxes that we actually can pass. So we'll see what kind of what he places on the call with respect to property taxes. On the first special session, the governor called out property tax relief solely based on reducing the rate. That's what the House did. And so we'll just see what he puts on the call, but I think you'll see the House will follow the lead of the governor.
Do you think that the governor will do that again this time, or do you think he's going to leave it up to the House and Senate to figure it out?
You know, we'll see. The governor and the House really have a long-term view with respect to property tax. There's a desire by both the governor and I think the majority of the members in the Texas House to actually one day get rid of what we call the M&O ISD property taxes. So remember, your school property taxes are made up of debt and M&O, and that M&O is kind of your daily expenses. And the idea is to eventually get rid of that piece of the property tax and fully fund it with state funds. So we'll see. But again, my suspicion is it'll be geared more towards reducing the property tax rates.
As you know, the Senate and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has really sharply criticized Speaker Dade Phelan and House members for, passing the bills and declaring sine die and leaving town, and not giving them an opportunity to work with the House on a compromise. What's your reaction to that?
Well, again, during special sessions, the governor has a lot more authority, a lot more power, and he dictates the parameters of what's on the call, what we can actually consider on the floor of the House and pass. And so the governor's direction was very clear. He wanted property tax relief in the form of reduced rates. That's what the House did. We got the job done, and we sent it over to the Senate.
Did it surprise you that the governor was very specific when he called the special session over what he wanted to see on property tax relief? Because during the regular legislative session, the governor did not give a prescription on what he wanted to see. He left it up to the House and Senate. He, on discussions with chambers of commerce and even out on the campaign trail months before that, he said, we're going to do it. We're going to provide Texans with record property tax relief, but he didn't offer a specific plan on how he wanted it done. So did this change surprise you and other colleagues of yours in the House?
Not really. You know, we had the full session, the 140 days to talk about property tax relief and what the forms should be. And there was a lot of debate. House Ways and Means Chairman Morgan Meyer did an exceptional job as far as guiding those discussions. We had a vigorous debate in committee on the floor, and both chambers did. And just the House landed on really what we could see that the governor was interested in, but also just as important, what we were hearing from our constituents. And so, again, this concept of more of a long-term view that I think the Texas House and the governor is taking, I think is what will end up prevailing.
How do you see this ending? Because, you know, the lieutenant governor says he's not backing down. The full Senate said that they're not backing down. You know, they voted just like the House unanimously. And so I'm wondering, how do you see this ending? Does it require the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker to all get into a room and hash it out, figure out a compromise?
Sure. I think at the end of the day, my guess is that's probably happening as we speak. Remember, one of the things that the House has done is we formed a select committee to look at this issue. We're going to look at a bunch of different options for both reducing property taxes and, you know, this long-term view that I keep talking about as far as eliminating some of the property taxes that are out there as well. I mean, you have our friend from West Texas, Dustin Burrows, talking about placing limits on the growth of property taxes, the individual property taxes of the different entities of 7.5%. So I think there's going to be a lot of dialogue out there, but I think at the end of the day, it'll be the speaker, lieutenant governor, and the governor that will just continue to have a discussion, while at the same time, in parallel, during that special session, there'll be a healthy debate and dialogue as well.
Has all of this dialogue and the back and forth and the bickering between the top three, has that hurt Republicans?
I don't think so. You know, that at the end of the day, if you look at the previous sessions, the House and the Senate towards the end of session start battling. So this really isn't anything new. Look, the Republican Party has healthy debates. And we're having one as we speak. But again, you know, because of Republican policies, we've been blessed by the people of Texas to be the majority party in the state of Texas now for almost 2 decades. And the results are in. We're actually, our economy, our Texas economy, the opportunity in our state, we have a safe state. We're now sitting on this massive surplus because we now have the 9th largest economy in the world. So we're looking at what's the best way to provide property tax relief, right? So, you know, at the end of the day, if we're going to have a debate on something, deciding on how to get property tax relief, that's a great debate to have.
Isn't a solution basically just giving everybody what they want, in the sense of give the Senate what they want, a homestead exemption, increasing it to 100,000, giving the House what it wanted, lowering the cap a little bit, and then also maybe coming up with some solution to gradually buy down the property tax over a 10, 12, whatever year period it is, to eliminate the, M&O tax, the maintenance and operation tax portion of the school property tax bill?
You know, you've seen that actually. I mean, the Texas House has passed 3 different versions of property tax relief. So we've been giving, if you will, during those negotiations. If you remember, we had appraisal caps and the like. And so we actually have been negotiating and trying to do a give and take approach. We're just at the point now where we're in special session. We had a great regular session. We passed a lot of important legislation. It's just going to take a special session to look at property taxes. But again, if you look at the Texas House and the way we've conducted ourselves with respect to negotiations with the Senate, we have been giving, we have been negotiating.
I also wanted to ask you a last question on this topic. How confident are you that a deal is going to be reached on property tax relief in the next session?
You know, I have a high level of confidence that we'll get it done. I think members of both chambers know if it doesn't get done in the next 30 days, that the governor will just call us back for another special session. And at the end of the day, we need to get back to our districts, live under the laws that we recently passed. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to get property tax relief. My hope is we head down a path where we're eventually eliminating the M&O school tax, but we'll see. But I'm highly confident this next session that we'll get the job done.
Now to Representative Tony Tinderholt of Arlington. So how do you view this impasse, this political standoff between the governor, lieutenant governor, and at some point the Speaker of the House? And how do you see this resolving itself?
Well, I think first of all, the House has to be there. We can't just do exactly what the governor wanted, because there are people in the House floor that don't believe that what the governor wants is enough. And I'm one of them. So what happened last time, this last special session, was the House passed a bill within hours of special session starting, and then sine died, which means, okay, we're done for the whole special session. Senate, you have our bill. Well, that's not how it's supposed to be done. We debate, we discuss things that we agree and disagree on. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of debating and discussing this special session because, look, make no doubt about it, taxpayers and voters want quality tax relief. They deserve it. And my pledge is we're going to give it to them.
And I was curious because I saw a tweet last week from another Republican representative, Matt Schaefer of Tyler, who told me, or not told me, but who tweeted that, forget the governor, forget the lieutenant governor, forget the speaker, get all the lawmakers in a room and we can have this hashed out in 15 minutes. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that the Senate and many of the House members, we know what we want. It's a combination. It's going to be a combination of homestead exemption, compression, and people are going to get permanent, long-time relief. And, I think when we do exactly what the governor wants, we're removing the three branches of government. We need to work independently and provide property tax relief and give it to the governor to sign. And I think we'll get a better package if we do it that way for taxpayers.
And so how confident are you that an agreement will be reached, an exact bill will be signed both in the House and the Senate and will be sent to the governor in this next special session?
Well, my hope is that we do it because the voters have said they want it. They deserve it. Our job is to go down there and work for them. Both of the plans at one point, they were pretty close. They were offering the compression and the $100,000 property tax exemption, $110,000 for people 65 and over, which would have given over $1,000 a year immediately to the over 65 people. I think we can come to resolution. My hope is that we stay there for the special session, we work hard, and we make this happen.
And you're saying no more sine dying out early. Stay the session and negotiate if necessary.
Right. No more sine die early. Let's quit the games between the House and the Senate. Let's do what's right for the people. And I don't think that 12 billion is enough, and they're calling it 17. I did an amendment on the regular session to add an extra $8 billion for taxpayers to bring it to 20 billion. But don't let the fake work on you if you're a taxpayer watching this. When they tell you it's the largest property tax cut in history, it's not totally true. There's about $5.3 billion that was passed as property tax relief in 2019, and they're including that. In order for us to have the most property tax relief in history, it would have to be at least 14.1 billion, and we're still in the 12 billion range. And let's not forget, we over-collected over $32 billion last year. I think we should give all that back, but instead, we're only trying to give you 12 billion and spend 20 more to increase the budget by 24%. So I'd like to see all 32 billion go back. I know there's a lot of members that would like to see at least $20 billion go back, But people need to see a difference in their tax bill in Texas this special session.
And I'm wondering, can the state afford this long term? Because if the lieutenant governor has said, if the state is going to do this, if lawmakers are going to do this, this has to be done every session going forward. You can't go back and say, oh, well, you know, we don't have the revenues this time. Sorry, we got to increase the property taxes again.
Right. I think we can. And the way we do it is we quit overspending. When we increase the budget in 1 year by 24%, that's despicable. Property, the inflation plus population growth, that's even high at close to 10%. If we would spend on the things that we should be spending on, which is education, which is our border protection right now, it's law enforcement and providing law and order in the state. It's the things that are the role of government. If we would stick to doing that, we could absolutely afford this going into the future, 100%. But look, we have to stop. I got elected in 2014, went to office in 15. Here we are 9 years later, and the budget has doubled in that amount of time that I've been there. We have to stop growing the budget and start giving quality tax relief to the people that are suffering. We can't afford to have anyone lose their house because they can't afford property taxes. And it's our responsibility right now in this special session that starts tomorrow. It's our job to do that.
And my last question to you, Representative, and I appreciate your time, has this impasse hurt Republicans?
I think going home, sine dying the day that the special session was set, us just passing a really quick bill and throwing it to the Senate and saying, see ya, was not a real respectful way of doing business. I think it harms the whole process, to be honest. And I think my hope is that the speaker, that we learned a valuable lesson and we stay, we debate, we discuss, we use all three branches of government, and we provide the people what they deserve. And everyone, doesn't matter who you are, you deserve it. If you don't own a house, you're at least renting, and renters will eventually see that property cost reduction as well. So we owe it to the taxpayers, government of the people, by the people, and we're going to be in Austin working for the people over the next 30 days is my hope.
That's it for Eye on Politics this week. I'm Jack Fink. Thank you so much for joining us. You're watching Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas.